Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your guest host, Tony Peterson. Today I'm joined by my good buddy, Tim Kent, who is a die-hard whitetail and western hunter and whose wife has battled cancer twice in the last decade. All right, folks, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, which is brought to you by First Light. You guessed it, once again, you're stuck with me instead of our fearless leader, Mark. This might surprise some of you fine listeners, but Mark is actually at the World Worm Charming Championship. Worm charming, which is also called worm fiddling and worm grunting, is the act of creating vibrations, somehow, which causes worms to rapidly squirm their way to the surface where you can catch them. It's a weird enough hobby, I guess, but the reason Mark is so into it is that he's actually really bad at fly fishing. I know he presents this image of a guy who knows how to gently lay a size 20 caddis on a dime-sized spot in a tiny, fast-flowing stream, but he can't. He mostly takes Instagram photos with his fly gear, while he mostly catches his trout on a cheap Zebco spin casting setup tipped with a big old nightcrawler. The Guinness record for most worms charmed in a session is 567, so let's all wish Mark luck on his quest to 568. Anyway, the shit is still hitting the fan this month. My guest today is a fella I met a long time ago in the hunting industry, and he's truly one of my favorite people on the planet. I love Tim Kent to death, and I truly mean that. He's a badass hunter, father, husband, and he's here to share the story of his wife battling breast cancer, not once, but twice. Tim talks about how quickly a cancer diagnosis forces you to refocus your energy, deal with the reality that you're largely helpless, and just how hard it is to process your life once it's taken such a different path than the one you expected. I think you're going to like this one a lot, and I think everyone who listens is going to learn a lesson or two about life. Tim Kent, it is so good to see your face.
Thanks. Right back at you.
You think I'm not being honest there, but I am, buddy. It's good to see you, man. I wish we were doing a different kind of podcast than this one, but I've been doing this kind of shit hits the fan series here for June since Mark's off doing whatever, and you're coming at this from a position of somebody that's a little bit opposite of Will Jimeno and Zach Fleer, who I've already had on, who they both went through something crazy. 9/11, kidney transplant, and they talked over and over and over how their wives were kind of the glue that held everything together, but also how much the wives went through during this process and the heavy lift of having kids at home, thinking your husband's going to die, heavy shit. And now you're on that kind of the opposite side of that. Hardcore hunter, worked in the hunting industry a long time, lived for the outdoors, lived for your daughters, but your wife gets diagnosed with breast cancer. World turns upside down. So when was it? When was the first diagnosis?
First diagnosis was 2015. For some reason I can't remember the month. But I guess it doesn't matter. But yeah, 2015, we went through that the first time. And then go ahead.
Oh, do you remember? We're going to get into it. Do you remember what you had planned that year? Because I know you're a guy who, if you live in New York State, you're pretty meticulous about your Western hunting, your elk hunting, getting out there, in addition to the whitetails at home. Do you remember all the things you had planned that year when your life was... you knew what your life had in store for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I knew I was going to Illinois to hunt whitetails. And I think the capstone, I was supposed to go to do an antelope hunt, because at the time I was working at the outdoor group and I was the executive producer of the TV show, Respect the Game. And, which for my role was more behind the scenes than anything else. I wasn't in front of the camera a ton, but that year I was going to try and do a little bit more in front of the camera. And, so I was going to try and do an antelope hunt. I was going to do an Illinois deer hunt. And then most importantly, just personally, I wasn't going to have this filmed, but that year I did draw a really good elk tag in Colorado that I had been applying for a number of years, that I ended up surrendering right before the season started, because you have up until then to surrender, either get your money or your points back. Well, the points these days are more valuable than the money. So, I definitely remember what I had on the calendar that year. I mean, I don't do a ton of out of state hunts at this point. I didn't, I guess then either. Before that, I was doing a lot more, but that was still a pretty stacked year for me, in addition to hunting at home.
Right.
So,
And you're very, you treat out of state hunting a lot differently than I do. I mean, it depends what you're doing for your job or whatever, like you kind of mentioned, but where I live, at least up until recently, I could get an over the counter tag in a lot of places and go. So if I had something come up where I had like a long weekend, I could skip out of state pretty easy. You don't really have the same situation. You do have states you can go to for whitetails, but you treat your travel vastly different. I mean, I know a lot of people in the Midwest are like, "Oh, I'm going to Colorado and it's a big trip." And you're like, "Yeah, it's 15, 16 hours, whatever." But you're coming from New York. And so,
exactly.
And you're a planner. So you have all this stuff on the schedule, big year, burn a bunch of points in Colorado, looking forward to that one, probably doing a ton of map work. And then what happens with your wife?
So, obviously we find out that she has cancer. And
was this from a routine checkup?
No, she just happened to have like a little spot of pain, and which normally that stuff doesn't present that way. And she just happened to have a little spot of pain, reached over and she felt something, and she's like, and it wasn't big or anything like that, but she felt something. And it's funny because the second time around, that's similar how it went down. And she's like, "Oh, I better get that checked out." So the day that she told me, those I remember indelibly, like those moments. But we were standing in the kitchen, and she's like, "Oh, hey, I gotta go. I gotta go somewhere today." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, where you gotta go?" She's like, "Oh, I gotta go to the gynecologist." Like, I thought that was, at the time, I think she was like 40 or about to turn 41 or something like that. And I was like, I thought that was later in the month or the year or whatever. She's like, well, I found a lump in my breast. And I was just like, it was just like the whole world slowed down. Like the earth just stopped moving at the same pace, just boom. And I immediately got upset, which is not my demeanor normally. And of course, I'm firing questions at her faster than she could probably answer them. Like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Don't worry about it. It'll be fine." I'm like, "No. What do you mean?" I'm like, you can't like leave me hanging like this. And so she told me what had happened, just as I had described a moment ago. And then she went to the appointment and they did an exam, and the gynecologist is like, "I don't think it's anything. We see stuff like this all the time, but obviously to be proactive, we're gonna send you in for an ultrasound, and just vet it out." And so I don't remember how many days it was later. I mean, it's almost 10 years ago now, but they scheduled that, and then that imaging person looked at everything. She's like, "I don't really like the way this looks," which is not what you want to hear. And I wasn't in the room with her, but I was at the appointment. And then that triggered a biopsy. And same thing. Like, I wasn't able to go in the room with her, but in every stage of this, it's kind of like stages of us planning for a hunt. You get more excited. Well, it's the opposite, obviously, in this scenario. Like, each stage you go along, you're a little more deflated and a little more deflated and a little more deflated and a little more discouraged and a little more worried and a little more anxious. And so anyhow, they scheduled a biopsy, and we go for the biopsy, and they do everything. And I don't know, it's like, I think that was like on a Tuesday, and they said they get back to us by like Thursday or Friday. And of course, they get back to you on Friday afternoon, just before your weekend. They're like, "Ooh, hey, by the way, bad news. This this is cancer. You're like, talk about your world slowing down. Now the world stops. And everybody's freaked out. And I always kind of call it the black box, because you're sitting there wondering what's happening next and what's inside the black box, and you can't see and you don't know and everything. And you're just kind of freaking out about the what if. And so I remember it was the night we found out. So it would have been like, Friday or Saturday morning early. Just sitting, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I came downstairs, and I was just sitting on the couch, and I was just processing, and I'm just hysterical, crying, because I like my wife. There's a lot of guys out there that don't like their wife. Like, I think, like, as my friend's mom said to me once, like, like, I'm obligated to love my kids, but I don't always like them. And the one, I'm not sure if I like at all, which I thought was like the most profound and funny comment ever. And so, I'm just sitting there. I'm totally upset. I'm obviously, like I said, I'm crying, and I'm just looking at it, and like, and I just don't know what to make of it. And that's what I'm saying. Like, just don't know what's next. And of course, anytime any of us hear the C word, right? The cancer, we think to ourselves the worst, right? We put them in the grave. And I was doing that. I was guilty of doing that. And I was guilty of doing that this second time around, even knowing better, right? And so I was like, okay, well, I have to muster up some strength. I have to try and be strong for her, because it's her that's going through this, not me. And so I did my best to get myself composed. I was probably still awake for a while, but I eventually went back to bed, and we just talked about it and worked through it and tried to figure out a way to present it to our family and our girls, which we kind of, that first time we held on to the news a little bit longer before we told everyone, because we still had a lot of uncertainty and a lot of unanswered questions that we needed to go through before we could present them with information. Because, as you can imagine, you say something to someone, you enlighten them to the situation, and it's like rapid fire of questions. They're like, oh no, I don't know. So they're in the black box too. So I think it was the following week we went, we met with the surgeon, and we learned more. And it's funny because your brain filters. I feel like the doctors tell you things to make you feel a little bit more comfortable, but then kind of like it's a sleight of cards, like a sleight of hand with cards. Because later on, Heather and I were both like, I could have sworn we didn't hear that was the case. Because, like for most people in that situation, they don't want to hear that they have to have chemotherapy more than anything else. I think that's the thing that people fear the most about cancer. Like, they don't care about getting cut. They don't care about getting radiation. Now with immunotherapy, they don't care about that. They don't care about not working. They fear chemo. And again, the black box of, okay, how's my body going to react to chemo? And you don't know. So for us, that was the big surprise. The doctor's like, no, this is triple negative, cancer, non-hormone receptor. She's like, there's no choice. You're having chemo. And we're like, I didn't think we heard that the first time. We thought we heard, lumpectomy, radiation, boom, boom, boom. This will be done. We're out, the baby type cancer. And that wasn't the case. She chose to have bilateral mastectomy the first time. And then she didn't have the choice. It was, I guess she did, but you're going to have chemo. And she had chemo, no radiation. But she did all that. And we went through that whole process, and it was quite the journey. And then we got to do it again this last year.
Well, we're going to get to that. But
yeah,
when you're sitting there on the couch and you're processing this, and when you describe, first off, her kind of telling you, like, I found a lump, I got to go in. And as it just like, it like descends further down and further down with, like more visits to the doctor, more information. When you're sitting there processing this and you're looking at that and you go, that to me sounds like when you find out they're pregnant and you're like, okay, this is crazy. But as they start growing and it gets closer to the
Who
due
did
date,
this to you?
right? You're like, it starts to get real. And then when they hand you a baby, it's like the arc of your life from here to forever is changed from what you thought. And I mean, that's what that reminds me of. But when you're sitting there and you're on that couch and you're like, I just got to get through this. Like the people who are listening to this probably don't know how well I know you. And you're the kind of guy who's you're a problem solving person. You just kind of figure shit out always. And you're very analytical and kind of linear in your thinking. You have this come into your life and now you can't solve it. So was it like the feeling of, was it just recognizing the reality that you were kind of helpless in this, and it was you're literally offshoring the future of your family to people, medical professionals, whoever, but you can't do it. Was that really hard for you?
For sure. But it's funny because at that stage in my life, I was going through a big transition of personal and professional development. And I was literally in the process, and it's so weird how the world works in that way, but I was in the process of like, relearning about myself, if that makes sense. And so I was reading a lot of books on like stoicism, and I was reading a lot of books on personal development, and my buddy would bust my balls all the time, be like, oh, how do you like that self-help book? You know what I mean? It's just like a 12-step program, right? But that was a big component of how to get through that. And one of the books that I had read during that time had a lot of stuff in there from Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor. And basically, the platform on which Frankl stood was talking about, you have two things that you control, right? You can control your emotions and you can control your attitude, right? You can't control these outcomes. So it was very difficult to do that through this process, but I was trying really hard because I needed to be in a positive place and I needed to be as strong as I could be for her. So that way she had, someone's shoulders to stand on, and for our kids and for our parents and whatever else. And so, and I by no means like was the exclusive thing. But it was a big deal. I see a lot of people that get into these circumstances and they fall apart themselves. And it's like, whoa, hold on a sec. You know what I mean? Like, can't do that. You gotta do what you can to support. Yeah, like definitely communicate about it. But yeah. So anyhow, so that was the thing that I knew I needed to do. I needed to control my attitude. I needed to be as positive as I could possibly be. And one of the people that helped me most, so back to this timeline of finding out, there was a woman that I had been working with for many, many years. Her name is Sharon. And I went to work that following Monday, and she worked in our accounting department. And I sought her out, and I went to her and I said, can you come outside and talk to me for a minute? And when we had found out, actually, I was at work, as a matter of fact. I was not at home, that she had cancer. She had called that afternoon, and I went out to the parking lot. Now that I'm regurgitating this, I remember better. Anyhow, so the following Monday, when Heather and I had some time to connect personally, I said, can you come outside and talk to me for a minute? Because Sharon had cancer 10 or 12 years before that, lung cancer. And she was an integral part of my business and personal life at that point, and made it through. She's a hammer. I mean, Sharon is an amazing person, amazingly strong and whatever else. And having known her for a really long time, I knew that Sharon was a lady, is the only way I could describe her. And I'd never heard Sharon swear in all the years I knew her. And we went outside and we went to the parking lot, and I told her, and I was upset. I'm talking a lot about me crying here, but and so I told her, and she put her hands on my shoulders, and she said, she looked me square in the face. I'm gonna try and say this without getting upset. And she looked me square in the face, and she said, listen, you're going to get through this. Don't you fucking bury her. And, it just like, was like, I knew what she meant,
Right.
she meant like, don't do that in your mind, and so we talked for a little while longer and then went back, I went back to work and whatever else. But that moment was like the tipping point, it was the tipping point to knowing that I had to be in a different position mentally, that I needed to be in a different position physically, I needed to just be in a different position overall, because if I spiraled out, well, then everybody else has a chance to spiral out. That stuff is like infectious. You know what I mean? Like your energy is infectious in a good way, but it's also infectious in a bad way. It's like you and I were on here and we're like, well, that's going to breed out to everybody else that's listening. Right. So I chose to do that. And at the time we were going through like a challenging phase with the business that I was working for too. So there was like a lot of professional pressure and stuff going on. And so, so I had like this silo of personal things and this silo of professional things. So it was a lot to shoulder, but you didn't have a choice, just had to get through it. And so we knew what our path was. We were told what our path was. And it's just once we discovered that and once we knew and there was a little more light in the black box, we just started moving forward. And so,
Tim, at that time, so for people who don't know, Mark and I have talked about this a lot. I do a lot of running, go to the gym quite a bit. But when I talk to you, I'll be like, I'll be happy I did like a 7-miler today. And you'll be like, I did 21 miles just between work calls. And I'm going to do a 73K tonight with a rock on my shoulder or some shit. That's what it's like to me. Talking to you and Jace is like that. I feel like such a slacker. Anyway.
Yeah,
okay. When this is going down, so how old were the girls? Let's ask this quick. When that first diagnosis happened.
4 and 8.
So you have a 4 and an 8-year-old girl at home.
Yeah.
Your wife goes in, and when they figure that stuff out, they move pretty quick because time is important on this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so you go from one kind of life to another real fast. And, you're talking to coworkers, you're figuring this kind of new normal out with these little girls at home. Was it like one of those times where you felt like you were presenting strength, but on the inside you were like, I'm not that strong of a person?
I feel like that every day, Tony. So like talk about imposter syndrome. Like every day.
Right. Right. I mean,
that.
As you're talking about this, I'm in my head, I'm seeing two people at the same time. And I knew, obviously I knew you through this and talked to you a whole bunch, but like, I see how it is that you just have to present this because it's beneficial to your daughters and to your wife. But like in reality, you're scared shitless.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. Everybody is, right. And so everybody that it affects, and it was hard. It's interesting because the kids at the time, our older daughter, I think had some level of understanding because if I remember right, there was another student in her, not in her class, but like maybe 1 year above her that had cancer. So like she had this element of awareness because of that circumstance. And unfortunately the outcome for that child was not positive. And, but the little one, she didn't know because she was so young. She just knew that mom was sick, and that we had something that we had to get through. But again, round 2 was quite different.
So let's go back to round 1 when you're in the thick of it. You get through it. She's going through the whole thing.
Yeah.
How long does that take?
She had surgery in August, and I want to say it was like August 14th, 15th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 12th. I don't know, August something, mid-August. And then she needed to recover from that. And then she had chemo for 4 months. So chemo started in September and lasted through, I think, December 30th was her last day of chemo. So she had 12 rounds total. So eight rounds total. So it was every other week. Boom, 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 boom. And she had no delays, no hangups or anything like that through that first round. So, and she hammered through it. She was a champ. Still worked the whole time. Would go to treatment, and then the only time that she had a problem was her very first treatment. Leveled her. I mean, leveled her, and she, for whatever it was, because they pump you with so much stuff, and it wasn't good. And then she had one little blip. I think it was the second to last treatment. She had really intense lightheadedness at one point after that treatment. But she would go to treatment, and she would go, except for that first one. She took a couple days off, but otherwise she would go to treatment on Wednesday, and she would go back to work. And she would start to feel crummy by like Friday afternoon, and then be on her back pretty much at home Saturday, Sunday. And then by the time Monday morning would come around, she'd start to feel okay again, and she'd go back to work and do it all again.
And so for people paying attention here, she gets surgery in August. The chemo doesn't wrap up till December. So she basically bookends the entire hunting season of 2015.
Yeah, so selfish of her.
I know. Unbelievable that she would pull that shit on you especially when you have those tags. Mm-hmm. What's that season like? Because I have to imagine, having known Heather a little bit and a lot through you, she's a pretty independent woman, pretty badass woman. So she probably knew how important hunting was to you and was probably encouraging you to go. But you were probably sitting there going, it probably felt different, didn't it?
Oh yeah. Well, I had between work and that, I had target panic so bad that year. It was unbelievable. Because I just was at this heightened sense of everything.
And you had not had target panic before that?
Oh, I'm sure I had I think everybody's got it at one point or another, but yeah,
but not
I'm
like
sure
this?
I had it before that. No, not like this. No. Or at least not that I can remember prior to that. And so I did get to hunt a little bit. The nice part, my parents would take her. Heather's mom was here like during the week a lot, and helping, which she did anyhow. Like that was part of our childcare process, and they were in like school, daycare, whatever, part of the week, and then her mom took care of it part of the week or whatever. And then but on those weekends that Heather had treatment, my parents took the girls, so they would take them Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. And Heather didn't want me to do anything, so most of the time I would try and hunt like Saturday morning, and then depending upon how she was feeling, I would do. But like all my duration of time was shorter, and there were definitely less days afield than there was. I actually did end up going on a different elk hunt, and I did end up going to Illinois, strangely enough, because we had two teeny little windows where that could happen. And she basically like sent me. She's like, "Go, I want you to go. We just don't know what things are like. Go and do those things that you want to do." And at the time, my sister was living in Colorado, so I it was great because I got to go and visit with her as well. My mom and I actually drove out together, and got to spend time with my sister a little bit, and then did an elk hunt for a few days. Short, it was only 4 days, but it was it was on a private place and whatever else. But and then did end up going to Illinois for a short whitetail trip, sort of between when she was feeling good, using using that time. So I did get a little bit of a pass to go, but it was that season was totally different. Like the level of enjoyment while I was out was different. And I think part of the reason why a lot of us hunt is to go and have that time independently, where we can go and just decompress, think about whatever. Obviously we enjoy the time in the field, but there's a lot of processing that happens during that. And that was good and bad at the same time, because there's a lot of wheel turning while you're sitting in the
Right.
tree stand.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because we do think it's common for hunters to think, people who are obsessed with hunting, diehards, whatever. It's common to think that you go do that and that makes you feel better about life. Like, it's kind of like this thing that refills your cup. And it certainly can be, but it's very hard to go like give yourself to an elk hunt or give yourself to that whitetail trip, even a 4-hour sit at night when you have a heavy lift back at home or back with work, or you're thinking about, like, what am I going to do with my kids this week? Because what if she gets sick? It's like an unspoken thing. It's an intangible thing we don't talk about a lot with hunting, but if you want to have success out there and you want to enjoy it, if you have a lot of mental baggage coming with you, it's almost impossible. It can happen in little spurts, but to like give yourself to that experience is tough when you have other stuff like that going on.
Yeah, for sure. And that actually carried over for 2 seasons. The next season, I still was processing all of that, actually. It was just, it's just one of those things. There's just all that time. And what do you do with that time? I don't know. I don't think, like, at that point in time, I was like spending as much time like looking at the screen on my iPhone while I was sitting in a tree stand. I mean,
Right.
Like now that's what I do half the time, where I'm writing notes or doing whatever while I'm there. So, yeah, it definitely is. It's good, but bad at the same time. And I can't say any one particular situation or day or any of that thing. I did. The one good thing that came out of that was there was a couple of weekends where I did get out with both girls, and both girls came and hunted with me just to get them out of the house, and that was cool. They were loud, and they were doing a lot of kid stuff, and we were sitting in a lot of ground blinds, and probably not the best places, but it was awesome to just go and sit with them and be with them and do stuff, carrying 500 pounds of My Little Ponies and coloring books and iPads and whatever else in pink backpacks. But we did it.
Been there, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
Been there, man. So, okay. Last chemo's in December.
Yep.
What's it like when you hear that it's gone?
Oh, awesome. It's such an enormous relief. And there's still that trepidation and that little bit of anxiousness that sits there, because you're like, well, what if? But with the type of cancer that she had and the type of treatment that she had, because she took like the aggressive approach and her doctor took the aggressive approach. They were like, hey, we don't want this to affect you in the future. We want to give you the same, of course that's their job, but like, we want to give you the same level of reassurance that a regular person would have about their incidence of having cancer from here forward. So, again, they do this aggressive chemo treatment. She chooses to do the aggressive surgery approach. Like, she's like, I don't want to have this. Now, fortunately, and something I didn't mention earlier, she did the genetic testing. She didn't have, any of the genetic markers for cancer, BRCA. She didn't have any genetic deposition. Oh my gosh, excuse me. Any predispositions for any genetic markers or anything else. So that was really positive, right? So we felt really good with the potential move forward, staying clear from there on out. And I mean, the doctor, her care team was amazing. Like, they were super upbeat, and her oncologist would always say, like, we're basically doing these chemo treatments to just reassure that the surgery did its job. Like, we cut the cancer out, it was gone in August. Like, we're doing this other stuff as like a safeguard. Like, we don't need to. I don't even feel like we need to. Because one of the things that I got hung up with the first time was they weren't doing any scans. They weren't doing anything, so like maintaining this high level of vigilance. And it's like, that's not the standard of care anymore for this type of stuff, because what we find is it creates more stress and more anxiety for people, and and everything else. So we don't do that, and then we actually see higher levels of reoccurrence. Is what they were telling us. We're like, oh, okay, we're gonna believe them. We don't really. Well, that's not my area of expertise, and so we felt good about it. We felt like, okay, yeah, there's still always that concern, but not at the same. Not at like the same level as before when we were again in the black box. So
yeah, so you get onto the other side of it. They can throw everything they have at it because she's young and healthy.
Yeah,
and she's ready for it. I'm sure that wouldn't be an option for every patient.
Yep.
You get on the other side, but you have this little specter. This just like there's a little part that's like, of course it can come back.
Course.
Like of course this might not be it might be over now, but it's not over forever, and that. But you go through how many years, and she's good.
Just under 8.
Yep.
7.5.
And then what happens?
Then we were so during that 7 years, like I end up going back to working for myself. And, starting another marketing company, going back to what I feel more comfortable with, having a little bit more freedom time wise and whatever else. And this experience with her was sort of the genesis of that. Like I realized, like, I don't want to go to the office, 8 to 5 every day. I don't want to do whatever. And, I was fortunate that I had a lot of support in that capacity and everything else. So I go back to that, ended up in 2020, starting to work with Whitetail Properties, and then doing that too. And so business was really good for that. Obviously came into a great time because the real estate market exploded as a result of COVID. And she comes to actually work with me in 2022, in February of 22. And so we're working together now. And fortunately we have the relationship dynamic and personalities where we can do that and not kill each other most days. And so at one point I noticed she's shopping a lot during the day. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, why all this shopping? Like we got work to do. We've got, tons of things to be working on. Like, what is she doing all this shopping for? So she goes shopping one day, and I'm sitting in the office, and she walks in the door, and she comes in the office, and I'm pounding keys on my computer doing whatever. And she comes up and she's like looming over me, like, I just turn and I look at her. I'm like, what's up? And she doesn't say anything. She just straight face. And here I am. I'm like, oh shit, she had an affair. She found that 25-year-old that I've been worried about my whole life hanging out at me.
Hey, when you thought of that, did you have a guy in mind where you're like, I'm going to kill this son of a bitch?
Yeah, exactly. There's 3 of them, It's got to be one of these 3 jerks, So I just turn, I look at her, I'm like, what? And then she doesn't say anything. So it was finally the 3rd time, I'm like, what? And I'm very stern. She's like, she just breaks down. I'm like, oh shit, she definitely had an affair, and she's like, I knew I shouldn't have been so hard on her. And she's like, I found another lump in my breast. And I'm just like, and again, like, talk about world slowing down. Like this time, like it's not a slowdown, it's like hard stop. Like everything slams against the wall, and it's like, and I just turned and I looked at her, and I didn't say, what do you mean? I didn't say anything. And I just turned, I looked at her, and I said, we went through this before, we went through this again, or we'll go through it again. And, God gave me broad and strong shoulders to carry through it another time. And that's what we'll do. And I think that's verbatim what I said to her. And of course, then, we talked through everything. And we were supposed to go on vacation the following week. We were going down to Florida with the kids, and they wanted to originally schedule the biopsy for that. And it was basically the same chain of events. Like had called her had called her gynecologist. They're like, nope, can't do it this time. different circumstances because you already have it. You're going to have to go to your primary care. She went to her primary care. That was one of her shopping expeditions. Primary care examined her. She's like, Heather, you don't have any breast tissue. She's like, this is just probably, like your implant blew out or it's some little fatty thing. She's like, I'm not worried about this at all. And Heather's like, oh, cool. A little bit of, unfortunately, false hope. So then she goes for the ultrasound, and the ultrasound woman, different practitioner this time, she looks at it and she's just like, I do not like the way this looks. She's like, I'm going to be honest with you. And Heather repeats back the same thing that the primary care had said, but I don't have any breast tissue and whatever else. And she's like, yeah, but she's like, the shape of this looks like what cancer would look like. She's like, she obviously tempered that. She's like, I'm concerned. And obviously that's not what you want to hear. And that was the shopping expedition before she came and broke the news to me. So they wanted her to go and have biopsy the following week. Well, we're going to Florida. And she's like, no, she's like, I have no idea what this is. This could be the last vacation I ever get to go on. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to Florida with my family. I'll take care of this when I get back. What's another week at this point? And so I'm down in Florida. We go to Florida, and we rented this house, and we used to own a house in this town, and we sold it when we were first together, or first married or whatever. And we couldn't get there, and we had hurricanes and whatever else. Anyway, so I'm down in Florida, and you talk about running. So I'm trying to maintain my fitness routine. And there was a gym right down the road, and a Y and whatever else. So I'm running, and I think I've told you this before. I like running, and it's hot, and I'm running with my shirt off, and I'm running the same sort of routes all the time, just adding to them a little bit. And I'm like hunting. Like, this is my time to think. Running is when I do a lot of my thinking, and I'm thinking, and as I'm running, I'm like crying. You know what I mean? Like, again, I'm talking a lot about crying here, but I'm crying, just crying, and like, because holy shit, my wife has cancer again. And I always joke when I talk about this. I'm like, there must have been, because I saw the same cars driving past me because I was running the same routes. These people must be like, this fucking guy hates running. Like, why does he even do it? Not that, like, irrationally, not that they could see my tears from, you know what I mean, like 40 yards away or whatever.
I bet you were just giving off some vibes that they picked up on, dude.
Yeah. So anyway, we go to Florida. We have a good vacation. We do the best that we can. We try, and we had already told. Oh no, we hadn't told the girls. Like, we were sort of hiding it, and so we're just trying to maximize the experience with them and whatever else. Because again, we don't know if our world is going to get turned on its ear. So we go. We have a great week. We enjoy the sunshine. We enjoy the time with one another, and then we come home, and she has that biopsy the following week, and sure enough, biopsy results come back. Boom, positive. She's got cancer again. And the first time, her tumor was like originally it looked like the shape of like a peanut, like a peanut in the shell. And they originally thought it was one tumor, and it was like 1.6 centimeters long. Well, it was actually two tumors that were stacked on top of each other. And I can't remember, but one was like 0.9 and one was 0.7 or something like that. And so, they pulled that one out. Well, this one was like the size of a big walnut, so, and she didn't even, she was being pretty vigilant about checking herself, obviously based on previous experience, and went through 5 years of seeing the oncologist and the surgeon and everybody else, like physical exams and whatever else. And the level of guilt that she felt for this whole situation was overwhelming to her, because she kept thinking like, I should have been more vigilant. This is my fault or whatever, you know what I mean? And it's just like, how do you know? You know what I mean? Like, you think you're in the clear, because again, after 5 years, they're like, yeah, hey, dude, you did it. You're good. You're in the same place as everybody else in the world. You have this % chance of contracting something. And so world gets turned on its ear again. And we found out, we went to the surgeon's office, because no matter what, they needed to take that lump out, whatever it was. We still had hope and faith that it was just an implant that blew out, and went to the surgeon's office to, discuss next steps. And they had just gotten the pathology back that morning. And they're just like, hey, we're sorry, but it's cancer again. And her surgeon was amazing. And she was amazing the first time. She was amazing the second time. And she's like, Heather, we got this. This is treatable. I know you're scared. She's like, we're going to do the same stuff we did last time. This is not uncharted territory for you. And there is like an element of confidence that comes along with it. It's the strangest thing, because you have this element of confidence where you're like, oh yeah, okay, been here, done that, know what's going to happen to a certain extent. And then there is this whole other layer of fear that you did not experience the first time, because you're like, oh wait, been here, done that, what if? And it still sits on you, the what if, because you're going, this is 2 times. That is bad odds, So.
Right. Is it because at this point, what's in store for her and for your family for like the next several months, but you also still have that, just like, there's an unanswered question there. Like, you don't know where this went. You know what she's going to go through, and you know that you don't know whether this works or not. Both,
right? So you know what she's going to go through, but we already know that she handles chemo pretty well, right? So that's positive. We already know what the surgery is going to be like, because she already did like the big mastectomy surgery. So it's not going to be to that same extent, right? They're going to go in, they're going to suck that lump out. They're going to, basically do a lumpectomy. And then they're going to swap out her implants, which was like super easy surgery, right? And, so that part's easy, but then they add in some additional treatments. They added in radiation and then immunotherapy, which, radiation you always hear is not as bad on people. For Heather, that impacted her energy level more than anything else. And then it's every single day is radiate during the week, 5 days a week. And then you have the weekend off, and it's 5 days a week, every single day. Boom, 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 boom. She had 25 radiation treatments. And then she had immunotherapy for 27 treatments, 27 weeks, 9 treatments, 27 weeks. And then there was a break while she was doing radiation, and then another 27 treatments. No, I screwed that up. A break after she had surgery for a little bit. Then while she was going through radiation, and beyond that, another 27 treatments. So she literally just last Thursday finished all this after basically 13 months. She just finished, not even a week ago.
Why was it different this time? Why the treatment options? Why so much more this time?
I think treatment options is one thing, and then just higher level of vigilance because of the reoccurrence. Like, hey, we feel good about this, but we want to make sure, like, we don't like that this came back. Like, her surgeon, when we went in to have that appointment where they broke the news that she had cancer the second time, her surgeon's like, I don't know why you're here. I don't like that you're here. She's like, statistically, you shouldn't be here. She's like, but I still have a duty to get you healthy. And her oncologist literally said almost the same exact thing. Like, okay, and we're going to throw everything at this that we can, so you and your family never have to go through this again. It's just like this common thread of, we got this, and they knew her because they had spent the previous time with her. So they knew she was going to give it her all too. And, that was it. So, and then the immune therapy is newer, right? It was around when we did this last time, but it wasn't part of this sort of standard of care. And now they're adding it to a lot of standard of care. And for most people, it doesn't have too significant of side effects. She's got like they believe a little side effect going on right now with some like lung inflammation. But other than that, just a little bit of energy depletion for a couple of days afterward. I mean, she sleeps way more than she did before. But I mean, she's been through 13 months of getting the crap beat out of her. So
yeah, her body's pretty tired, man.
Yeah, exactly.
How
And that's not even including the emotional toll.
Right. We're going to get to that. How did this experience change how you view healthcare professionals? I know you've been through a little bit. You rhabdoed yourself working out too hard one time. So you've been in the hospital before, but this is a different level.
Well, this question has like two answers. So the answer of like, how did I feel about her care team? Like the answer is they were amazing. You know what I mean? Like absolutely incredible. And that's the positive side of things. Like they did everything that they were supposed to do, extremely compassionate, like extremely understanding, extremely patient, gave her all the necessary time that she needed. Like everything from like when they told us that she had cancer, that was on, I think it was a Tuesday. And literally on Wednesday, like the next day, she was having surgery to have a port put in. Like that, and that day we found out first thing in the morning. Like we went from one appointment to the next. Like, okay, we got to go from the surgeon's office. Now you're going to go have blood drawn. From there, you're going to go visit with the oncologist. And then from there, we just were like, do appointment. They were not messing around. Like we are rapid fire getting this taken care of. And I thought that was incredible because there was no haste. There was no waste of time. There was like, hey, we got to get this taken care of ASAP. And they did this process a little different this time around. The first time she had surgery, then she had chemo. This time they did chemo first because they wanted to shrink that tumor down and make it go away if they could. And then they were doing surgery. So she was in chemo, I think it was either 1 or 2 weeks later, she had her first chemo treatment. After that, it was just like, poof, no messing around. So we just, it was like a barrage of doctor's appointments that first week. And then like, yeah. And then, so the other side of the spectrum is this. And you and I are close enough where you know this. Like, I think that it's crazy that this many people have this many issues with their health. Like, right? And so for me, I like environmentally what we're exposed to, food wise, what we're exposed to, and whatever else. And then the fact that these doctors aren't prepared for that stuff. That's not their fault, right? They are the end result, right? They are the reactive measure. But I find it kind of appalling that as a nation, we are not more proactive in that capacity. And then the other component of that, which is separated from, environmental food, whatever, is just like the billing systems at these hospitals and insurance is bullshit. Unbelievable. Like they tell you it's only going to cost so much money and you only have so much out of pocket. Not true, dude. Like it is unbelievable. And we pay for our own health insurance and we have a good plan and it's crazy expensive. And it's painful to think of how much money we have spent in these two things. It is unbelievable. Never mind the downstream effects of her not being able to work at the same capacity. Even though she's a hammer and she still worked both times, it wasn't at the same capacity. It was at a diminished capacity, whatever else.
When you deal with this type of situation, you do see a bifurcation between the people who are taking care of you, the professionals who are, in healthcare, and then the business side of healthcare.
I got an invoice the other day because I have a running injury that I'm working through right now. And I got an invoice that for my x-rays and for my doctor's visit to the orthopedist. Attached to my invoice is 2 oncology appointments that have nothing to do with me. They're hers, but they attach them to my account. 2 days ago, we got an invoice that's not even for us. It's got somebody else's name on it. Things that don't line up to us for oncology, but unwinding all of that it's a quagmire. You have to go and be like, well, no, this, yeah, like we're husband and wife, and then this other thing, she spent so much time on the phone with the billing department at the hospital that my mom used to run. You know what I mean? Like, and my mom, like, I'm like, Mom, what about this? And she's like, yeah, that's going to be tricky. Just like, crap.
Yeah, it's a flawed system, buddy.
Well, it's just too big.
Right.
I think that's the flaw. It's like anytime anything, and I don't care what it is, right? Like I've worked in the hunting industry my whole career, right? I've seen companies go from like this and making really great products to like this, and they're challenged along that path because it's just the law of averages, right? The more stuff you put out, the higher your incidence of creating a lesser quality product becomes. It's just math, right? You're not going to change the math. Yes, exactly. It's just scale. And so it's really hard to keep that contained. It's why, Six Sigma exists and lean manufacturing and whatever else to try and isolate that down to the highest level of accuracy and everything else, consistency. And, so you see that within this system, like there's just so much going on. But to my earlier point, it's like if we were more proactive and, we weren't doing this with our food, or we weren't exposing ourselves to these chemicals, or we weren't doing this, we weren't doing that. Like, I'm not saying it's an absolute idea, but the odds that further downstream they would have so much to be processing, this would be less of a conversation piece, in my opinion.
Right. It makes you see, it probably makes you, it's probably the wrong way to put it, but a little more judgy on people who aren't taking their health seriously when you see what can happen just by the whims of the universe. You can be in real trouble, let alone if you put yourself in a position where you're unhealthy.
Man, and like, I don't care what other people do. Like, that's the lifestyle that they choose and whatever else. Like, and anybody can get stricken with anything at any time. But it's just, it definitely changes the perspective of things. And that's the thing I think that hurt Heather the most this second round was she was just like, I did everything right. I've exercised. I have switched to organic. I'm mindful of what I do. Like, yeah, I still drink wine, but like she did all the right things. She followed the path, the right path. And still, and who knows if she's got no genetic markers still, even with the new genetic testing that goes even deeper and broader. Like if they did my genetic testing for markers for cancer, they'd look at it like, well, you're fucked. Just throw that away. I'm surprised you made it this far. And dude, she's just she drew the short straw, unfortunately. And,
how has this changed her? Like what have you seen
she
in her?
Yells at me a lot more. I don't know what.
A lot more?
Yeah. I think during both situations, it made her appreciate like time a lot more, and time utilization also seems to have made it so the people that she's investing her time into have changed. She's super, super friendly and she's super sweet. And of course I'm supposed to say that because she's my wife, but it's true. But I've seen her just not investing as much into certain circumstances or certain things or certain people. She's just like, whatever, not getting involved in things that maybe she would have. She's not much for drama to begin with, but like really avoiding those situations. And, I think just really taking the time to identify what's important and what's valuable and what's meaningful in her life and taking a higher level of pursuit toward those things. Because you go through this and you certainly realize the fragility of it all. And I think that's definitely one of her biggest takeaways. So
I have to imagine your tolerance for unnecessary bullshit gets pretty light when you.
I didn't have any before, so now I have less than any, and hers is definitely tightened up as well.
I could see that throughout this process, which has been a long one. You mentioned you started a couple marketing companies. You worked in the hunting industry a long time. You went over to Whitetail Properties right in the middle of COVID. Started selling hunting land, and you seem to me anyway. And maybe I'm wrong here, but from the outside looking in, you seem to go really hard in the paint the last few years. And it's not like you weren't working hard before, but I felt like, I'd talk to you, I'm driving over to hunt somewhere in Wisconsin or do something, and I would talk to you at random times, and you were always working. Like, did you, I know you felt an obligation because of how expensive this whole situation has been. And, you obviously Heather has been taken out of the workforce for a while, and this is a real financial, there's like a real concern there for anybody who goes through this. Did you feel an obligation to just bury yourself in the work because that was something you could control in this situation and sort of mitigate some of the negatives that could come out of this by just like, I'm selling more freaking farms, I'm marketing myself more, I'm doing everything I can because this is where I can lift us up?
Unfortunately, yes. And it's also like a big distraction mentally. And I'm guilty of that to begin with. My kids, it was my birthday last month, and my daughters made me cards and whatever else. My one daughter wrote in there, she's like, "Dad, I wish you didn't work so much, and I wish you weren't so hard on yourself." And that's not the first time either one of them have said things like that, and that's a hard thing to process. But in this particular situation, I feel like there's a lot riding on me, right? It's just like, listen, man, like nobody's filling my bank account other than me, and nobody's doing this stuff other than me. You know what I mean? And so it exposed me to different methods of thinking, how I was operating my businesses, and that type of thing, and looking at scalability in a different way. But and we're working through that. But yeah, it's unfortunately that's a personality flaw that I have. I think some people look at that as like a personality strength, and I don't. It's just, I don't think it's good. But I also didn't want to get to a point where, last time we went through this financially, despite having awesome insurance, it literally just wiped us out. Like between her not working and that no income during that small, so she did have, like I said, that small amount of time where she didn't work, and then because she couldn't lift anything because she had that big surgery, right? And she would have, but she just couldn't. And between that, the cost of everything, and everything else, like when I filed for taxes the next year, I literally had to borrow $5,000 from my business line of credit to pay for our taxes because I had no cash. Like it was gone. And I went from, like, I'm not going to talk numbers, but I went from having like a really solid bank account to nothing. And like, again, like the format of this is not to bash on our healthcare system or any of that type of stuff, but it's just like, even when you have the right insurances and whatever else, like it's unbelievable. And not to the same extent this time, but definitely, I think we just treated it differently. But yeah, it was wild. It's just, and so I knew that going into it. So I was like, oh no, got to prepare for this. And,
Right.
And then there's also the element of, not to sound like a pessimist, but like, okay, what if? Got to be set up. And we're well insured otherwise. We both have disability policies and big life insurance policies and whatever else. But we were talking about this yesterday. I keep having this, I keep having this reoccurring dream that we're getting a divorce, and like, but we're getting a divorce, but we're still friendly and we're still hanging out. And I don't want this divorce, and she really doesn't want the divorce either, but we're getting a divorce. And I have it over and over and over again. It's like probably once a week in different circumstances within the dream. It's not the same exact dream every time, but it's the same circumstance every time. And I was thinking about it yesterday. I'm like, why do I keep having this dream? And I just, she and I were talking about it. I'm like, I'm afraid I'm going to lose you, and so I wanted to do my best to like set us up just in case that were to happen, because it's still a possibility. It's a possibility for all of us. Never mind this particular circumstance. Like, dude, anything can happen any day. Like, wake up tomorrow and find out you have pancreatic cancer. You could get, into a very bad car wreck. Like, there's any one of those things can happen at any time, and you can have an aneurysm, whatever, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to sound like a pessimist here. It's just the reality of life. And so, I'm just trying to make it financially. So, our kids would be okay, and we would be okay, and whatever. But that's hard to strike that balance. And that's what it's like with us working together. That's one of the best things is we get to spend a pile of time together, whether it's just having, a cup of coffee or tea in the morning, or having breakfast, or running out and going and looking at a piece of ground together, or she telling me that I have to go fly the drone somewhere or whatever, and comes with me, or whatever, road time. It's really cool that we get to share that time through our work. And I look at it like a gift. It's the only thing we actually argue about is our work, but that and where we live. But we're here. So
I know that argument, buddy.
Yeah.
What's your advice? So you've traveled west a lot to hunt. You've hunted a lot of elk, western critters. It's always been a pretty high level priority for you to get into the mountains. You've worked with whitetail properties, selling people their dream, right? Like somebody who wants a place to hunt that they can control and hit listers and all this stuff. Kind of, you've experienced both sides of what I would consider very common dreams for hunters, people in our position. What's your advice for people now? Because I want to just run something by you here that I think you'll be able to relate to. Iowa, their draw, non-resident draw, the whole situation basically happens in the month of May. So we just kind of got out of that. And, I applied for Iowa, and I have a good buddy who has several points, but he's kind of hesitant to apply. And then he bought a point instead of applying to hunt. And he's like, you could, like, the regret was there. Like, I probably should have just done this. But it's I was like, in my head, I'm like, dude, how many times do you think you're going to get to hunt Iowa or someplace like Iowa before it's too late? And which could be next year or 25 years down the road. But it made me realize something where I'm kind of like, if you have the chance, you better go do it. If you can buy that elk tag in Colorado and go take advantage of one more year or whatever, or if you can scrape together a way to buy that 40 acres to hunt with your kids, do it. Like, how did this experience change your view of that kind of thing?
One of the things that I think all of us think we have more of is time. And that's the point you're trying to make. And that's not guaranteed. It's not. And so that sort of galvanized that for me. And my focus, I guess for no other way to put it, for a really long time was pretty selfish, right? I was doing a lot of hunts. I was, traveling a lot. I was focused. I often talked about the first time that we went through this, that, I felt like it happened. It was the God or the universe or whatever. It was, sort of the world's way of telling me to like slow down and focus on what was important. And my family was more important, because I had myself convinced that I was doing a lot of the things that I was doing because I really thought I was doing it for my family. And when the perspective shifted, what I realized is I was doing a lot of it for me. And so I have wondered through this process if the same thing was happening again, to say like, hey, you're not doing this for the right reasons. You have to re-tilt your focus and come back to reminding yourself, like, why are you doing these things, whatever. And I'm not hopscotching across the country at the same level that I was before, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hunts a year, out of state trips to go visit with clients or do certain things or trade shows or whatever. I felt like, I was constantly on a plane, man. You know what I mean? Like, we're in the truck. It was just every month I was going somewhere. And I liked that because, I wanted to see the US and I wanted to go experience a lot of other places and whatever. And I did spend a lot of time with my kids, and I have a great relationship with my kids. But I wasn't sharing a lot of that with my family. And I maybe wanted to, but I didn't know how. And so we went through that duration of time, up until COVID, where we were doing a ton of stuff. We were traveling all over the place, and business was good, and whatever else. And business was good through COVID too. But now I do a lot of traveling, but I'm doing it within 2 or 3 hours of home. Like, I'm in the truck, a lot of seat time. And, there are nights where, I don't get home until 10 or 11 o'clock at night because, I was down showing a piece of ground somewhere or evaluating a piece of ground or doing whatever, especially this time of year with really long days. And so that's sort of stolen time from my kids and my wife to the same level. Right. And that's the only person that has the ability to make that decision is me. And so I have to do that. And I always tell this story, and I know I told it to you, but when we went through this the first time, when I went out to Colorado to do that one elk hunt, I was down driving by the Blue Mesa, and there's just like a whole bunch of scenic area down there. And I was like, man, if I lived in Colorado, I'd be fly fishing all the time and camping all the time and doing this all the time and hunting all the time. And I gotta convince Heather to move to Colorado. Like, this is the thing. And it was like a lightning bolt hit me, and I was like, dude, you have never even been to the Adirondacks in New York for a trip. You and your family have, like, you know what I mean? Like, for a trip. Like, I've been there for my buddy's wedding and whatever else, but never gone and camped there or fished there or did whatever. Like, one of the most amazing places in the East. You've traveled all over and done all these things, but you've never done a ton of stuff in the state that you live in. All these things that are in your backyard. You and your family have never been camping. And I was like, we're going to do that. Once she gets through all this, we're going to do that. And so, like, that very next year, like, once she was healthy, we took the kids camping for the first time. And it was like, what's going to happen? And it was a success. You know what I mean? And then the kids started fishing, and Heather started fly fishing. And we just started finding time and ways to do more together. And, I feel like now we still try and do that. The girls are older. They're into less stuff. But Rensley just started hunting, so that's cool. But Heather doesn't hunt, and Shay doesn't hunt. So we can't do that together with them. Rensley and I can share that. We still camp, but the girls are at that teenage time where they're not as into camping, and it's them doing it because Heather and I are either making them or because, they just don't want to have an argument. You know what I mean? Like, they're going because we don't want to leave them home for the weekend or what have you. So we're working through all that, and I'm working to try and, like, figure out this next phase of our lives, and, like, okay, what's the wisest decision for our time utilization and our time maximization? Because Bren is 17, like, she's going to be going to college soon. It's like, which is blowing my mind, and Shaylee is 13, and she's going to be, doing whatever she's doing. And she's super active and has, a lot of things that she's involved in. And she's just a different kid, so just trying to find those ways to maintain connections with them while maintaining, Heather and my connections. And
making all that work with business and not, so you're burying your head in your work. And I am super, super, super guilty of that. Again, to my earlier statement, thinking that I'm doing it for my family, but the people that I'm stealing from, and I use that term very specifically, people that I'm stealing from are the exact people that I'm trying to provide for. You know, it's like your own little game of Robin Hood within your household. Like, but it's the same people.
Right.
Oh, the rich and the poor, and the rich and the poor, and the rich and the poor, and the rich and the poor. Wait, which side are you on?
I mean, I don't think this is I don't think that's an uncommon struggle to feel a deep obligation to provide, but also be acutely aware that that's taking you away from the people you're providing for, and the life that you're trying to give them. You're also taking yourself a little bit out of that. And, like you watch your kids grow old real fast. And, you talk about this, like when you said that Heather's first diagnosis was in 2015, I would have guessed probably like 2018. I mean, just in my head, it doesn't feel like it was that long ago.
I know.
And time just flies by. It's just wild, man. So the last question I want to ask, kind of on this, kind of just about the Whitetail Properties thing. I know people reach out to you all the time, and I know that you're dealing with people who are like, I've got the money and I'm buying something, just show me the right thing. All the way back to the tire kickers who are like, I'd really love to have some piece of land, some size, some scenario that they've conjured in their head where they're like, that would be real special for me, but you probably know they'll never do it. And you hear from a lot of people like that. What would you tell those people now that are kind of like the tire kickers who they know, like maybe they can make it work somehow financially. Maybe it's like a real feasible thing for them, but there's a hang up mentally. What do you tell those people?
I just try and show them the path if I can. Like I think a lot of people doubt the possibilities of doing things. Like it doesn't matter what it is. Like, whether it's going and running a 5K or land ownership or, watching a spouse come through a health crisis or any of that stuff. There's so many people like, and they need someone to be able to show them that path. Like, so, if you, if you want to own a new Matthews bow, okay, that's no problem. That's doable. Like here's what the path looks like. If you want to pay down your debt, okay, here's what the path. I mean, Dave Ramsey's made a whole, world out of that. Like, hey, this is how you get your finances under control. You want to buy a piece of ground when those two things kind of go hand in hand. Here is a realistic path. Set realistic expectations, but here's how you can pyramid from one thing to the next. And I'm also guilty of this, as is Heather. Like sometimes I think some of us are too persnickety about what we're trying to identify that we want, and it's just like anything else. Like you got to start somewhere, right? So maybe just buy a 10-acre patch, right, and do a little bit of improvement on that, and then own it for a few years and flip it. The market's going to appreciate, right? Now you've built a little bit of equity, you've built a little bit of credit, you've done whatever. Like you have that opportunity, or you maybe built a little bit of cash, a lot of bit of cash, depending upon the circumstance. Like, and you can use that to leverage your next move. And so I think most of this is like, realizing that a lot of these things are doable. And then like as agents, like with our team, I'm constantly telling them like, hey, maybe that person's a tire kicker right now, but 3 years from now, they may be in a completely different position and they're no longer a tire kicker and they're legit. So if you brush them off, like, oh, they're not going to ever turn into anything. Somebody else might nurture them and they might turn into something. So, and I think that's the same for all of us with all aspects of our life. Like, oh, you watch your kids like in sports, right? And maybe when they first start, they're not the greatest. It's like, there's like a story about like Katie Ledecky when she first started swimming. Like she was not a great swimmer, one of the best female Olympians ever in the pool now. You know what I mean? So everything takes time and effort and whatever else. But like if you automatically think, well, nope, the answer is no, or you don't nurture things, You're never going to know. I'd rather run at a wall 100 times for myself or for someone else and still find a negative result and keep trying than not. And I mean, that's the thing with all this path with Heather. It's like, okay, well, this is what we had to deal with. And we walk the path, and we know we have a journey to go on, and it starts here and it hopefully ends here. But if we give up, it's over. You know, I mean, she could have just said like, no, I don't want to go through chemotherapy again. Okay. Well, you've just pretty much committed yourself to a death sentence, you know? Right. And so it's just not an option. So.
Man, like on that note of, you know, doing something, like taking some risks, like getting after it a little bit, even like with the land thing, you know, when you said, you know, buy 10 acres or whatever, like when I bought my first property, it was 28 acres and it's a piece of shit. It's shaped like a lightning bolt. It's half total swamp. I mean, everything about it kind of sucks.
Perfect.
At least on paper. The hunting's not very good, whatever, you know, like we can go right down the list, but it was what I could afford because nobody else wanted it. And my thought was like what you said, just buy it, build it up, do some work and sell it and buy something else. But in the process of working on it, I just fell in love with it. Even though it's still not a good place to really go hunt, I enjoy working on it. You know, I can take my daughters there. I know now I would have regretted it so much not doing that. And doing that put me on the path to do it again. And I'm talking like cheap, shitty land. Like I've never bought a property that anybody was like, that's awesome. They've always been like, oh, like, are you sure? Like, are you sure? But what that kind of stuff does, and how I want to wrap this up is if you can take that risk somehow, it's worth it. You almost will never regret it. It's the same way when somebody like you talks about going for a run and you passively tell me you're doing a 20 miler today. You have no idea like how that bleeds in a positive way to other people. So like when I quit drinking and I started working out, you and Jace, I'm always like, if those guys can run 100 freaking miles, I can drag my ass to the gym and do something. And I'm telling people to listen to this, put yourself around people who are doing stuff you think you can't do. Like put yourself around people who have said, I'm going to try it anyway, and I'm probably not going to regret it, and have learned that path to put yourself out there a little bit. Because the value of having a friend like you in my life has been immense. And I honestly mean that, dude. I wouldn't be
right back at you.
I wouldn't be working out. I wouldn't be at the place I am now without people like you. And I think a lot of folks listening to this who are like, I'll never afford that elk hunt, or I'll never go on that elk hunt, or I could never have my little 20, 25 acre property. It's never going to happen for me. Maybe that's true. Everybody has different circumstances, but also maybe you just haven't been around people who are doing stuff that people say you can't do it. Can't run that 100 miler. You can't buy that land. You're total blue collar, whatever. You didn't come from money. The more you're around people who are just like, I'm going to do it anyway, I'm going to figure it out, the more you realize like, man, there's a lot that you can do. Like a lot of what holds us back is just between our ears, and it's something that you can get over. And when you do, like you make that progress, like running, like you said, running a 5K. You could probably run a 5K with 2 broken legs. Like most people can get there to 3.1 miles somehow. And if you can do that, a 10K is like, okay, that's you're gonna be able to do that. And if you can run 6.2 miles, where's your limit? Like, is there one? But you gotta get there.
You use the right word as far as I'm concerned. It's all just a process, right? Everything is a process. I remember one time I posted a run that I had done, and one of my friends from out west, he's like, I can't believe you just ran whatever it was, 16 miles. I'll just say that was the number. And I was like, it wasn't always this way. You know, when I first started running, running again. I ran in high school and stuff. But when I first started running again, I couldn't run a quarter mile. and then it became a half mile. And then, I've talked about this a lot. And then it was a mile, and then it was 2 miles, and then 3. And then I remember when I did my first double digit run after all that time, I was like, whoa, 10 miles. And it's just, for the record, I've never run 100 miles, by the way, but it's just one of those, it's one of those things. It's like everything else that you build to. And the same thing is true when it comes to land ownership, or, like I said, watching a spouse go through a circumstance, or having going through something yourself. It's all just a process. And, like the old saying goes, like, you can't eat the apple in one bite. And it's true. If you break everything down, this is a dumb example, but I was mowing some fields at the farm that one of the farms I leased for hunting the other day. And I was like, I'm going to put in corn this year. And I'm late. It was a little wet this spring. I couldn't get on to stuff and get it cleaned up, especially with how these 2 sections drain and whatever else. But I mowed. So I was like, I changed my plan. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to mow this 3/4 of an acre here. I'm going to redo this food plot. And then on the other side of that field, like I usually leave the field tall. On the other side of the field, they have another, like a little over an acre plot. I'm just going to mow those out, and I'll just redo what's been in there. And, I'll have this plan instead. I got done mowing those 2 things. I was like, well, shoot, I'm already 2/3 of the way done with the mowing component. Should I just mow this whole thing down and whatever? Ultimately, I changed my mind due to fawning habitat and cover and whatever else. But my whole point is, like, if I had just started and broke it down into pieces, I probably would have had a different thought process. And like, I think people sometimes get overwhelmed by the pieces, but if you just take the pieces and execute on them, like this is my big thing lately with everybody that surrounds me. It's like, go and execute on a thing. Even if it's not the outcome that you expected, just go and execute. Because if you don't execute, nothing happened. Where at least if you do that, something happened, and you're the next step forward, the next stage forward. And it's not always easy to execute. And I'm totally the guilty guy of writing out these big long lists and being like, okay, I got all this stuff to do. And then if I get through 60% of that list in a given day of tasks, I'm like, woohoo, I did it. But I used to be like, oh crap. I would see the 40% that I didn't accomplish instead of the 60% that I did. Now I just look at it, I'm like, okay, well, we roll that into tomorrow, and then we get more stuff done. And the more I've advanced in my career, the more I see things like that, and personally too. And I just go, okay, well, we just got to execute. We got to execute every day, and that's what gets us through everything, and it's what gets us through these circumstances, even if it seems like we're standing at the bottom of Everest with whatever else. Okay, well, we just go the first step. You got to take the first step, and so many people are afraid to take the first step. And I've been there, but you have to. I don't know. I like it. I like the challenge of that. I like when people tell me like, "Oh, you can't do something." Okay. Now you've really challenged me. You tell me I can't do something.
I love it, buddy. If anybody's listening to this and they want to buy some land out there in New York, where can they find you?
Whitetailproperties.com, Tim Kent, and I'm on Instagram, Facebook. The Instagram is Tim Kent WP, and I think the Facebook is actually the same. But yeah, hit me up. Tim.Kent@whitetailproperties.com is my email, and I'm happy to talk to anybody about that or whatever else. I just love helping people.
I love it, buddy. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was great.
That's it for this week, folks. Make sure to tune in every week for more whitetail goodness. I'm your guest host, Tony Peterson, and this has been the Wired to Hunt podcast, which is brought to you by First Light. Now, if you want some more whitetail content, feel free to head on over to the MeatEater.com to get more than your fill. And while you're there, feel free to check out all the other podcasts. We got a ton of video series up. lots of articles, recipes, and maybe if you're feeling like treating yourself, you can do a little shopping at the MeatEater store.